So it's time we talked about Sonic the Hedgehog. The fact that you all know that this is going to be a downer is kind of what it's time we talked about. We all know there's a problem. We all know that Sonic hasn't been in a legitimately excellent game since the Dreamcast era, if that. Now, if I'm going to take a hard look at Sonic, it can't just be what's gone wrong recently. It has to also include things that may have been broken all along. In other words, I may end up having some less than flattering things to say about Sonic period instead of just Sonic now. And now, folks, if you've been watching these videos for a while, you know that I'm a big Mario fan, that I was a Super Nintendo kid, not a Genesis kid. If you're of the opinion that those facts mean I'm somehow not allowed to criticize Sonic, or that it's somehow improper to compare one mascot seemingly past his prime to another who's evidently not, especially when they were positioned as rivals/equals a decade or two ago, well, you should go watch another video. I have little patience for the console wars now, and I've no patience, period, for refighting the console wars of 3 generations ago. So, anyway, Sonic. To get what's gone wrong, you gotta go back to what was right. Generally, Sonic fandom overwhelmingly regards the 4 titles released on the Genesis between 1991 and 1994 as the golden age of the franchise. These were the original Sonic games, built on a platforming gameplay variation that was at the time fairly revolutionary. Rather than leading the hero through levels exploration style, this series was fixated on speed and forward momentum of a type that can only happen on a fixed linear 2D path. Sonic flings himself from one end of a level to another at top speed, and you spend more time keeping him from colliding with hazards than fighting bad guys, at least until the level bosses in the later areas. Solid games, to be sure, but Sega wasn't taking any chances. They'd zeroed in on the early 90s as a key moment to make rebel inroads against their market-dominating competitor, and to do that, they needed a vanguard that could do for them what the brothers Mario had done for the enemy. One-time mascot Alex Kidd, he got the boot, and a team of designers set about crafting a new mascot to be the cool alternative to Mario. Sonic would be all about attitude, from his trademark smirk to his semi-mohawk hairdo. I mean, I doubt the exact words were ever used, but if you were to hand a design team some cynical marketing department character directive like punk rock Mickey Mouse, what you'd get would more or less be Sonic the Hedgehog. So then, like I warned you, it's worth considering that some of the problem might be that Sonic started out as something of a poochie, a character built first and foremost for marketable hipness. That doesn't have to be a negative. Ghost Rider has always looked like a panderific combination of recurring rock album cover art motifs, but he's been alive and kicking for 2 decades now. But it is more often than it isn't. Simply put, cool has a shelf life, and if cool is all your character has, so does he. Let's take a look, and I promise not for too long, at a mascot from the same era who isn't in such dire straits. Yes, you know who. Now, you can call Mario many things, but cool has never really been one of them. In fact, he's almost radically square. He's certainly no rebellious teenager, rather he's a grown-up with a blue-collar job of all things. And his overall design is grounded in caricatured Americana going back at least as far as Popeye. Timeless, you see, is sometimes the best way to go, hence why everyone remembers Bugs, Daffy, and Porky, but almost no one remembered Cool Cat until they started using him as an in-joke on the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries. Fortunately, cool wasn't all Sonic had. He had gameplay. The Genesis Sonic games played like nothing else on the market. In the 8 and 16-bit eras, platformers tended to be about exploring a whole stage or killing every enemy. Sonic games were about getting to the end in one piece as fast as possible with as much loot as you could carry, a fleet-footed execution that tied in with the character's yeah-whatever flippancy. More immediately, the focus on speed helped reinforce the concept of blast processing, a largely made-up marketing term touting the Genesis' supposedly advanced processing power. Yet, this could also be another source of the problem. Sonic's brand of race-to-the-finish gameplay philosophy just didn't work best in 16-bit 2D. A strong case can be made that it's the only place it ever worked. The fixed linearity of a 2D plane is one thing, but 3D suggests if not demands a more exploration-oriented approach, something a speedster just isn't built to do. But more so than even that, there's the whole blast processing thing. Sonic's super speed was built in for the purpose of showing off what his flagship hardware could do, so once gaming entered the era of plus-sized internal processors and disk-based data, being able to move through a game world rapidly was no longer guaranteed to impress. People stopped going, "Wow, he runs fast," and start asking, "Yeah, but what does running fast do for me exactly?" Or even, "Why does he run fast?" And that why opens up a whole other can of worms. Just who the hell is this guy? Even by the standards of other minimally characterized platform heroes, Sonic's history is a fucking mess. In the 90s, Sega worked to maintain its pop-cultural cutting-edge presence by encouraging autonomy between their American and Japanese divisions. Among other things, this led to each territory having to design its own divergent Bible of Sonic continuity. Japan's Sonic lived on an Earth as a heroic vagabond, fighting Dr. Eggman wherever he may go, while America's Sonic defended an alien world and Eggman sported the rather Cold War-ish moniker Dr. Robotnik. This was, at least, a good way at the time to keep cultural trends from intruding on the coolness of the individual character. What was cool in Japan would not always be cool in America, and this way, Sonic would always be on the cutting edge. Meanwhile, over on the manga side, another story was being told, with Sonic as a normal teenage hedgehog who turned into a superheroic blue hedgehog to fight evil. American Archie Comics and ABC's Saturday morning Sonic cartoon cast him as the frontman of an all-animal guerrilla freedom fighter team on planet Mobius, with a separate cast of characters from the game no less, while a separate syndicated Sonic series sucked. But in 1998, the newly dawned age of the internet meant that you couldn't keep one continuity secret from another, so when Sonic Adventure debuted on the late-lamented Sega Dreamcast, it did so with what was for a Sonic game a sprawling backstory, drawn primarily from the Japanese incarnation, much to the confusion of many American and European fans. Sonic Adventure itself, meanwhile, is probably the last great major Sonic game. Oh, it has its problems. No one's ever really figured out how to make open-world 3D platforming work with a speed-based character without sticking zip lines and fast part events everywhere, but generally it's a pretty damn good game. In fact, it's the last truly good Sonic title in my estimation, aside from some smatterings of goodness on the handhelds. Some of you are now wondering, wait, if he doesn't hate all the 3D games, why end the good era at Adventure and not Adventure 2? Well, that's why. Let's be really, truly, explicitly clear on this matter. Shadow sucks. He's the worst fucking evil version of the hero character in gaming other than Waluigi. He's awful, and come to think of it, so are the rest of them. Let's backtrack a minute. Sonic Adventure's big innovation for open-world platformers was to play Rashomon with the plot structure. Multiple playable heroes with separate intersecting storylines. Great idea, just one problem. Sonic, in the games anyway, was kind of a loner. For the 4 Genesis games it was just him, Tails, eventually Knuckles versus Robotnik. Then he got a would-be girlfriend in Sonic CD. There were some other random pals here and there, but it wasn't until Adventure that we started getting an info dump on the extraneous others, none of whom were especially interesting, and all of whom now comprise what is likely the most useless supporting cast in video game history. All of this turmoil, both past and present, could still be overcome if the fellow in question had proper guidance. Just look at how much having their respective creators remain in charge and involved has benefited the long-term stability of Kirby and Mario. But Sonic has had no such luck. Most of the original Sonic team has long since moved on, and while Sega can be said to have done a lot of things right lately, taking care of their one-time favorite son hasn't been one of them. Instead, Sonic finds himself in the unenviable position of being popular enough to be useful, but apparently not loved enough to be used well. He lately finds himself likened unto a one-time celebrity-turned-infomercial pitchman, his image pasted onto Sega's latest half-baked experiments in the hope of eking a few more dollars out of nostalgic fans. And make no mistake, at this point, nostalgia is all the poor guy really has going for him. It's clear that no one in a position to help at Sega gives a damn about him. It's all based on a powerful affection still held by his fans for the face of a series of games they remember loving more than a decade ago. As of recent, he's had the 2 storybook games and spent time as a rubber-armed werewolf, and before that he was part of the worst attempted resurrection of a faded 90s icon since the Ultimate Warrior's ill-fated WCW stint. Hell, Sonic even has nostalgia to thank for his only recent appearance in a decent console game, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. No one who'd been begging for him to join that roster for 2 sequels did so because his moveset promised to be all that interesting. They wanted him in there so they could act out a crossover fantasy they'd been nursing since the 16-bit console wars. And so, here we find Sonic the Hedgehog, one-time icon from an age now past, still alive but adrift and directionless. It's sad enough to make one wonder if we aren't asking the wrong question about him entirely, if instead of figuring out how he can be saved, we ought to be questioning whether he should be saved at all. After all, some things that happen in pop culture belong to the specific moment they came about in. That's why you haven't heard from MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, Kid and Play for a while. And does anyone really want to see, say, Doug Funny pop back into existence or find out what he's been up to? There's almost a kind of poetic irony to the fact that Sonic got his American cartoon speaking voice from actor Jaleel White, who is best known as another media-dominating figure remembered with tongue-in-cheek fondness but seldom begged for a return, Steve Urkel. Well, I for one think that not only is Sonic still worth saving, but that he can be saved, and I've got a couple little ideas as to how that might be possible, and, incurable narcissist that I am, we'll be devoting an entire episode to that next time.